Welcome to the Wise Wellness Guild podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about food and body image and how nutrition and cultural expectations feed into the way that we look and feel about our physical bodies, and how mental health plays an incredible role in our ability to live a whole, more well-rounded life. Today, we have an incredible group of women here to lead this discussion, and we're going to really just have an open and honest conversation, being vulnerable about how we're stepping into this really unique time in history where we can be more open and honest about some of these expectations that we hold ourselves to. I'm so grateful for the Christ Hospital for providing support for this episode. And for more than 130 years, the Christ Hospital has been dedicated to providing the best, most compassionate care for our community. By continually reimagining what healthcare can be, we have become more than just a hospital. Today, Christ is an extensive network of 65,000 employees, 1,200 physicians, 600 volunteers, serving patients for more than 100 locations throughout Greater Cincinnati. Learn more at thechristhospital.com. So today, diving into the conversation, we have an incredible group of women, as I mentioned. Today, we have Dr. Sarah Bartlett, obstetrician and at the Christ Hospital, Morgan Angelique Owens, CEO of Morgan Angelique Owens Brands and Curvy Cardio, Emily Robinson of Abide Health Coaching of Anchor Wellness, and Sarah Lavanier of Galia Collaborative. So thank you so much, each one of you. I really appreciate the time, and I would love for each of you to just go and introduce yourselves and share a little bit more about why you said yes to this conversation today, and just a little bit about your backgrounds and how you can maybe help support some listeners here today.
I am Sarah Bartlett. I'm a gynecologist with the Christ Hospital. I focus on gynecology, so women outside of pregnancy, so teenagers up until whenever. I have a real interest, though, in sort of wellness, preventive care, a holistic approach to really listening to women and taking care of their needs. And part of that has a lot to do with women's relationships with food and their body and treating their body properly and maintaining health as a product of that. So this is very much an interest of mine, and I'm eager to hear and learn from everybody else today.
Thank you. And thank you for, and I'll openly say the correction on your title, because I know that you had mentioned that previously. So with this focus, just Sarah, I'd love to share a little bit about, I feel like that a lot of people have a one-sided, understanding of what a gynecologist, the relationship looks like. And so I'm just really excited to dive into that conversation and be able to, your approach is one that I have not recognized other people are taking. And so I think you'll find that this isn't just about one part of our body, but about our whole selves. And Dr. Bartlett has really stepped into this role of continuity of care and really trying to help support people through their whole selves. And I just really appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, Emily, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Thank you, Stevie. Appreciate that. Yeah, my name is Emily Robinson, and I am the founder of Abide Health Coaching, and it also has a yoga therapy kind of portion under that as well. And I work in partnership with Anchor Wellness in Kenwood. And so really my main focus, I work with various different clients, but really my main focus is why I'm so passionate about this conversation in general, is really working specifically with women and even young adults, even I'd honestly say kids, anywhere from 13, 18, that kind of range, into the college years, of working with people that have disordered eating, body image issues. And again, it really ranges as to what the clients that I see, but that's the thing that I'm really most passionate about, having come from a history of an eating disorder myself, and using yoga and yoga therapy, and then kind of from there going into health coaching as a part to really help that kind of holistic wellness. And I think that there's just kind of a need for someone that's like an interim between like a counselor and a doctor, because both of those things are very, very valid, and a health coach never, is a substitute for either of those things, but it's really more like a partner to do certain things that a doctor can't really, outside of a hospital, hold your hand and do these things. They can give you all of this knowledge and guidance, but then a lot of times people won't follow through on the practical application of that, which I'm sure as Dr. Bartlett's really frustrating. But people, we as humans, we need accountability, we need a partnership. And then, the counseling aspect of it, I think, is wonderful because it kind of gets into the why, and it can talk about trauma, which is so commonly present. And as a health coach, that's not something I'm going to get into. I always tell people, I'm not going to unpack your childhood trauma with you, but I will unpack your schedule and maybe things that are tripping you up, and your sleeping habits and your, nutrition and exercise. And we'll get into all of that more later, but it's really just health coaching in general, and why I'm so passionate about it, like I said, is just to be that partner, to help people really have that whole wellness and kind of live their best life, and not in that like hashtag live your best life way, but really like that wellness. I am grateful, I am satisfied, that confidence and that contentment that comes with living a very well balanced life, and not just when it comes to nutrition and exercise. Wellness is so much more beyond that. It involves exercise and nutrition, it certainly is a part of it, but also sleep and like your social aspects and the emotional aspect of it. So that's really where a health coach comes in and can offer that guidance there.
I love that. I think that's so needed and valid as we're stepping into how do we create a support system and community around the people that are, really challenged in this space. Raising my hand right now, somebody who really needs some support and guidance. And I know somebody as a part of this group that has really built a legacy on supporting the empowerment of women, girls, and stepping into this space is Miss Morgan Angelique Owens, and all of the things that you have done, Morgan. You've really taken your voice and allowed for that to be the thing you lead with, which is about, really owning your story, owning your body, and the powerful things that can do with it. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. So, Stevie just hyped me up, so I don't really need to say much. So again, my name is Morgan Angelique Owens. I do the most. But pertaining to what we're doing today, I've always struggled with my weight since I was a young girl. Stevie talked about, her hips, but in the Black household, hips are it, right? It's always been it. I've always had thick thighs. My mom has little skinny legs. She would always say, I wish I had your legs. But I went to a school I was blessed that my parents were able to send me and my brothers to private schools. But on the flip side, there was only a couple people who looked like me. And so I developed a complex about my body and my self-image that I thought I had to look, a certain way, really skinny, because I've always had thick thighs since 4th grade. Now people are buying these thighs, honey. They want it. So I kind of dealt with battling that. And, at home, I was built up. Like I said, my mom loved my legs, my body, but inside I was dealing with that, of not being accepted with my peers, and, boys are everything in middle school. And like, why don't the boys like me? Because I need to be a certain size and shape. So I grew up with that. And even through college, I lost weight, but I still had that inner pool of myself of not loving myself fully. And, I grew up I was 27 years old and just decided to love myself no matter what. Because after a while, it just gets to be too much, right? And at 35, this is me. Like I may never touch the hem of a flat stomach, but I'm okay with that. And along the way, I started my first business, Curvy Cardio, which is 7 years old. And it's all about empowering women and young girls to love themselves from the inside out through fitness. And that was really it. Once I started learning about food labels, I did Weight Watchers back in when I was my 20s at Cincinnati State when I used to work there, just for a competition, because I love winning some money now. So I'll sign up for anything for some money. But that's where I really learned at like 25, 27, how to read food labels. And it just changed me, how I felt inside, how it gave me energy. And then Curvy Cardio just turned into a support system for other women, especially minority women who don't really take the time out to take care of themselves. Working out now is trendy, but back then it wasn't, because we didn't want to sweat our edges out. So y'all, we take our hair very seriously. And if we sweat, this all will go out into a fro. And so, I was one of those women who didn't want to work out, didn't want to sweat, because I needed to keep my edges in check. And so over time, I turned that into going to schools, helping young girls that look like me and talking about healthy body image, talking about healthy self-esteem. I went as far to write a book about it, and that turned into a bigger thing. And so what I love about this and love what Stevie does is talking open and honestly about, my experiences, my story, which has really crafted everything that I do, even in my corporate career to now my, entrepreneurship life. Your success really determines whether or not you love yourself fully from the inside out, right? It's all about your confidence, your self-esteem. And I'm a firm believer that if you love yourself, you believe in yourself, you can do anything. But that starts with healthy nutrition, healthy, working out, healthy body image, right? And so I'm going off on a tangent, but I'm grateful to be here. Grateful to be on a panel with you all, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Well, fantastic. And I'm really excited to dive in a bit about around that, around the conversation about what that really looks like too. Even there's the judgment of body size, of body image coming from the external and like the cultural expectations and things. But on the converse, Morgan and I have countless conversations about what it means to embrace your body image and the judgment that also comes from that too. And so we'll dive into that a little bit more and just get a little more candid about that, because I think that that's as important once you're healed, like people accepting that you're healed. So wonderful. And absolutely, last but not least, Sarah, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Congratulations on your first day being housed out of the Liberty location up at the Christ Hospital with Galia Collaborative.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, big first day here at the Christ Hospital. So I am actually, first I want to say I'm loving this panel already. There's so many parts that I'm like, oh, like, yeah, let's talk more about that. Let's dive into that. So I think you have picked a great panel already, Stevie. But I'm a clinical psychologist at Galia Collaborative. Prior to my time at Galia Collaborative, I was the clinical director of the eating disorder program at Lindner Center for 12 years. So I have a long history of treating eating disorders on every level of care. Body image is something I'm super passionate about in terms of prevention work, but also in recovery of an eating disorder. How do we help ourselves love our bodies and appreciate our bodies, respect our bodies, but also really respect and honor the person that's living inside those bodies. So I like to talk a lot about like relationship with ourselves, but also relationship with this earth suit that we wear every single day. And how do we honor it through our behaviors? So that can be through nutrition, through movement, through even relaxing and vegging out when we need to. And also honoring it through the way we talk to it. Like, are we being kind? Are we able to say hi in the mirror versus this is wrong and this is wrong? Are we able to cheer ourselves on? Are we able to be our own best friend? So that's kind of the angle I like to come from, is that we live with ourselves every second of every day. Let's make sure that relationship feels kind and good and self-compassionate versus the enemy we can sometimes be in the mirror.
Oh my gosh. And I have never heard the term earth suit, but that forever is now here we are. That's it for me. Yep. Okay. Now I know. I think I was, using something a little bit less flattering than that previously, but I do think that, that kind of takes us to this first topic that I would love to cover with all of you, is around this idea of body image and trends. I mean, we talk about, like, if you really think about, I think it was, you look back to the beginning of time, really, about what is it about the human body in different cultures and throughout time that we've accentuated and prioritized, and some that we've really tried to deprioritize, and things that goes from everything from, shaving body hair to, dyeing, some parts of our hair, and like body shape and all of that. And so I do think that there's, a lot when it comes to this conversation in relation to our relationship with our bodies, with physical activity, with working out. I wanted to just talk a little bit about how do we see the way that culture and trends play into this. And, maybe Sarah, if you could share a little bit about your observations and how maybe we always hear the comparison is the thief of joy, but I wonder if you can shed a little light based on your experience as a clinical psychologist of what you've seen, maybe some macro trends and what you're hearing.
Yeah, well, I think, yes, I think you're speaking to like over time, and we can look back very early on, just like whatever was being shown around us, we kind of trend with it. So it could be from the fashion industry. And I think now it's a little bit more of social media and so much access to so many people and influencers that are like maybe showing us what we think we're supposed to be like.
Mhm.
And especially with the pandemic, it was really interesting. National Eating Disorder Association said their calls went up about 70 to 80% during that time. And I was thinking a lot about that as well, with a lot of isolation, but then also we're spending a lot of time looking at our phones and social media and all of these. It's like we're choosing to follow certain things, and some things are really helping us, maybe building us up. And then there's certain things we're following that are actually making it harder and getting us more stuck. And like, I need to look this way, I need to be this way to be okay. And there's a lot of competing messages out there. I think there's like, love yourself, be yourself. And then there's messages, but in order to do that, you need to look this way, and you need to eat this way, and you need to exercise this way. And I think it leaves us feeling really defeated and really hopeless. And then sometimes we're picking our maladaptive behavior to try to cope with that.
Well, and I would agree. I think one of the most mind-blowing things that I had heard of is I shared with you, living and dying by, tracking my caloric intake. That's what I was told by a very reputable source when I was a high school athlete. And, they said, you've got to stay under this 2,000 calories a day. Like, this is it for you. And, I never thought about it until I hit 35, right? When you're like, wait, do I have a thyroid issue? What's happening? And you just don't revisit it because you look to somebody in a position of authority. And I think that this is where Dr. Bartlett, I would love to touch base with you on this because, we know that BMI has generally been used as the proxy for how, whether you're healthy or not. But what we're coming to find is that even the, institution of BMI as a whole, when it was started, was really based on what, like, white male men, and not actually for women. And so I would love to just know a little bit more, in your perspective, how you feel like maybe you've seen things shift even in the medical industry and how you help people navigate, some of these conversations that they're having and maybe managing some of the intake.
Gosh, it's so tricky. It's so tricky. All the things you just said, like, because ultimately you want people to feel confident and healthy and happy. And you've got to reconcile all these different messages. Ultimately, like when we talk about disordered eating, which is sort of an extreme version of what we're talking about, but a very specific thing. And Sarah certainly is far more of an expert on it than I am. But things like anorexia and bulimia, we hear a lot more now about binge eating disorder, which I find really interesting. And my job as a gynecologist isn't necessarily to treat it, but to identify it, to listen, to ask the right questions, and to take advantage of this very privileged position I'm in to hear women in the most intimate settings and pick up on cues and then send them to the right people to have the conversations. And that's all of you guys, all of us as part of a team. So it all comes from perceived standards of what's acceptable. And that's perceived, it's not factual. And that's where it gets tricky. So there are certain health standards that as a physician, my goal is I want you to be happy. I want you to feel good and confident, but I really want you to be healthy. And that should encompass all of the above. So health is my standard, and science is my tool for doing that. So there is science behind a lot of this too. And we have to rely on what we know to be the latest research. So things like when we talk about diets and diet trends, even healthcare providers, physicians, nutritionists, people are outdated because they may not make an effort to stay up on that science. And it just happens to be something that I personally am very interested in and professionally have extended that. So you have to trust the science and then trust the people who truly have an interest in it and have their ears open for what people need in their lives and what's happening culturally around us. So I think I mentioned a little bit just about like eating disorders, watching for anorexia and bulimia and all that kinds of stuff. And touching on what Morgan had said, I was reading about this the other day, and I was reading about, there was a population study a while back that showed that actually Hispanic, Asian, Native Americans, all of those individuals experience they have a similar experience to their white counterparts in terms of their concern and their behavior surrounding their weight and their body image. So it's interesting that we're all kind of the same. Now, African Americans are interesting though, because as a group, they have less of a concern. And they've shown this scientifically, but it all depends on how you're looking at them and in what segment of so your experience is unique in that sense, and I think notable. What's really interesting too is it brought up that binge eating disorders, though, as I mentioned, they're on the rise in minorities and everybody. This is a real thing for sure. So binge eating I see it all the time in my office too. The other thing is the LGBTQ community seeing a lot more eating disorder. And so I think just as being an inclusive providers and people, we need to be very aware of that and have our ears open. So like I said, my job is to sort of have these conversations and hear people.
I love that so much. And I love that, again, we've been through such an interesting time and it's still continuing, right? There's still so much uncertainty. I don't know that we will be without uncertainty ever, but I think that people have found a way to try to control this part of their lives, right? This is there's a lot of different factors that I'm sure that we'll get into here in the next part of the conversation. But I feel like that, one of the things that I can say to be true in my conversations with women is that, this time has really challenged their ability to, be able to manage anything else. And so they really put a heightened focus on this piece. And this is the one thing that they can control. And I think that that's where, as you're kind of seeing this rise, as, Morgan was kind of sharing, and I would love to hear more. Morgan, I want to touch base on this, like these cultural trends and kind of how we've stepped into this. Do you think that, in the work that you've done, and I've really seen you leading with so much conviction and personal bravery, in the sense that like you've really kind of commanded an audience in owning yourself and said F off to the haters who might see that confidence as being unfound. And so I think that, that's also been a cultural shift of like accepting and loving your body has also been met with a lot of criticism and shame, maybe from more patriarchal cultures or from people who want to keep the control in their own, they want to own the control versus us as women owning the control. So I want to just hear a little bit about your thoughts on like how maybe through your years, Curvy Cardio 7, how you've even seen the dynamic shift a bit in your experience.
Yeah. So, when Curvy Cardio started, to promote my class, I would put like my before and after pictures after doing like Weight Watchers, and really started. I became a Zumba instructor before I founded Curvy Cardio for 2 years. And I really saw how my body changed, and I wasn't doing it on purpose, but learning how to read food labels, learning how to portion control. The thing I really loved about Weight Watchers, and if y'all are listening, y'all need to hire me as an influencer, because they taught me that I could still have a piece of pizza. I just didn't need to eat the whole medium pizza, right? I can still have 2 pieces of pizza. I can still manage my day. I can still eat bread, whatever I wanted, but it's all about portion control and all about planning. So I really loved that program, and I saw my body changing. And at first, like I said, I posted my before and after pictures just to, one, get people to come to my class, but 2, to show all my ex-boyfriends that I was fine as wine now, and I was showing out. I was a little petty, y'all. I was in my 20s. I was a little petty. But the more I started sharing my story and telling people, like before, like Facebook, I would never show my full body. It was always like a neck up picture. I remember I said, this is before I really found my self-love. So I was really like catfishing, maybe you could call it catfishing, just showing my, head up pictures. And then I started having women inbox me and say, wow, Morgan, I never knew you felt like that. I feel the same way too. And these are women that were like 10, 20, even 30 years older than me that were battling with their self-confidence. And like I said, during that time, there wasn't a whole lot of fitness options for minority women. I always remember my mom saying every time like a workout video infomercial would come on, she would say, well, where's the fat people? Like the real people, right? Because going to a gym, doing workout videos with women that are already in shape can be intimidating, right? And so I really wanted Curvy Cardio to be a safe space. And I would tell my clients all the time, and still do, y'all, I be cussing myself out because I be doing the most and I be out of breath and I'd be like, all right, y'all, wait a minute. I need a break too. So it's like you're working, I'm working too. We're all in this together. And I think I became successful because I was very transparent. I would tell them, yeah, I slipped up and ate a whole medium pizza again last night, but guess what? Today is a new day. So I was never and will never be the instructor to tell you, oh, you need to eat, rabbit food, or, oh, you got to do this. Oh, if you miss a day of working out, shame on you. No, it's normal. It's fine. But tomorrow's a new day. So just start over. At least you don't quit, just start over. Yeah. So just being transparent and sharing my journey really started to motivate women to come to class. I mean, I started off with maybe 1 or 2 people, and Curvy Cardio grew to like 60 minority women in the gym working and getting more aware of their fitness goals, but also mental health. Because as women in general, we do a lot, watching my mom, sacrifice and like taking care of me and my older brothers and always doing things for others and never for herself. You can only pour from an empty cup for so long. And I used to tell my clients, give that 1 hour, 2 hours a week for yourself to come work out and do something good for you, right? So Curvy Cardio really turned into more than a fitness thing, but really a safe space and really a motivational platform for people just to take care of themselves. And some women probably haven't lost any weight, but they come every week faithful. And that's all that matters to me. I've had women, like I said, call me crying, just thank me so much for starting Curvy Cardio. And they will not let me quit, y'all. My knees can't take it anymore. I can't jump it down the rest of my life. But I say I will keep doing it. If just one person needs it, I will continue doing it. So
well, I love it. And I know that this month we're doing a partnership with you and Crunchmaster Crackers. We're doing a summertime find. So if anybody's listening, you can join in on that. It's free, completely paid for by Crunchmaster, led by Morgan. And I think that that's the part of it that we're kind of getting at, is like, it's more than just, like I said, this earth, what do we call it? This earth suit.
The earth suit that we wear.
Yeah,
let's take care of our earth suit.
Exactly. Let's take care of our earth suit to make sure that it fuels our purpose. And I think that kind of takes me to, Emily, as we talk about, Morgan, relaying the importance of creating that space. You had mentioned, and I want you to dive in a little bit more about, you're seeing such an increase in calls and people kind of diving in a need for even to have a third party come in and help them create that space and maybe even hold accountable. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Morgan, I think that's a really valid point. And I mean, especially coming out of 2020, this pandemic, and like you said, Stevie, we're still coming out of that, and B, kind of reaping the repercussions of all of that, and having to navigate what that looks like. And like you said too, like women, we carry a big load. We, although that's slowly shifting, I think culturally, we still, if you have kids, it's the kids. And now childcare and school has shifted to being, at home. We have to do the meal planning and the grocery shopping. Maybe we work outside of the house too. You're an Uber driver, you're a nap time master, you're you're all of these different roles. And it's very, very easy for the first thing to go to be that, what I would consider a form of self-care, is taking care of yourself by doing things like working out or eating healthy meals, or even just going and sitting in a closet quietly. I don't know if that's right. Okay, good. The therapist is nodding at me. So I know that's a valid,
whatever you need.
A valid coping strategy. Like those are always the first things to go. Cause again, like, okay, I have this really important work meeting. I don't feel like I can, get out of that, or I don't feel like I can, not pick my kids up from school. But what I cannot do is take that bubble bath or take that after dinner walk or go to my cardio class that week. And so, but by the end, we end up getting this, fatigue, because we have never done anything to build ourselves back up, to invest in ourselves. And so a lot of time with my clients is spent on rebuilding that self-care aspect, even if they have a very specific weight loss or health goal, I'm like, how are you sleeping? And they're like, no. I asked about a nutrition plan. I'm like, I know, but I want to know how you're sleeping and how your water intake is. So it might be frustrating to some, but it's like, we have to go back to the basics sometimes. And then also look at your schedule, because it's, for me to say, yeah, it'd be great for you to work out 3 times a week and move your body in a way that you enjoy, not just like, okay, I'm going to prescribe running on the treadmill and weights too tight. Like, no, find it joyful movement is what I had one client call it. And I thought that was beautiful. I'm like, yes, find joyful movement that is something that you enjoy and gives back, rather than just feels like another thing either that you have to check off of your to-do list or feels like another form of punishment. Because I mean, we're all, levels of exhaustion, I think, across the board for everybody, having come out of 2020, for everybody is there. And so we don't need anything else added to our plate. So really, my goal as a health coach is really honestly to take things off of your plate, to simplify things, and to say, instead of doing more, where can we do less? And where can we build in a healthy structure and rhythms and routines that makes your weeks and your days flow, and that are building towards this, again, overall sense of wellness and confidence. Because again, you have your instead of your life running you, you're running your life kind of feeling, where it's like, I'm not just like that hashtag mom life kind of vibe that we get all the time. And I mean, as a parent too, trust me, there are some days where it's a hot mess zone up in here. So I don't want anyone thinking that I'm preaching from my ivory tower. Like, I have days too where I'm like, okay, we're phoning it in. It's Chick-fil-A and everybody's going to bed at 7 because I got to tap out. But I think that there's this kind of hot mess mom culture that we have going, that sometimes I honestly find a little concerning, because it's like, well, while I completely understand like normalizing that and saying, oh, you too, thank goodness, like, and there is that relief factor, but I don't want people to have to stay there. You don't always have to be like chasing your tail or feeling like you're always behind on things. And if you do, then there's probably an imbalance there. And like, let's find out where those imbalances are, and then talk about how we can rebalance that. Or do you need to go talk to someone like Sarah? Or do you need to go make an OBGYN appointment? Or do you need to go to Curvy Fitness and work out some stress? Like, whatever it is, let's find those imbalances and let's get some good rhythms and routines and structure back into place to, again, have you have that whole life wellness.
I think that's a great point that you make, that, that's, let's get into some like, okay, so what? Things are hard. We know that we've got challenges. We know we're really working against some pretty big cultural challenges, right? We mentioned that working against us, right? We've got our time and are the only non-renewable resource, right? The only thing you can't slice up, you can't outsource. It's happening whether you like it or not. You've got cultural stigmas, whether, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too whatever. And then you've got what you're putting into your body, right? We've got diet culture, we've got pizza is unhealthy, but cauliflower pizza is healthy. And like, all of these different things. And it's like, well, pizza in moderation, it's like all the information. I think that it's really getting down to, again, the basics of what is the right information and how do we move forward? And what's that foundational piece? And I heard from you, Emily, you sharing a little bit about, you take a very individual approach to starting at the baseline of, let's just talk about what your day looks like, and let's outline your calendar, and let's see what you're doing. And let's do you start with some journaling? Do you tell me a little bit more about what that looks like to just kind of get started in understanding? And then we'll take, I'd love to hear from Dr. Bartlett a little bit about like what her recommendations would be from a doctor perspective on how she even gets started, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely sometimes journaling, although I did have one client came in right off the barrel, I will not journal, so don't make me. I was like, okay, not the right approach for you then. So Sarah's nodding, yeah. So again, like you said, it's very, very tailored, because I understand that what works for one person may not work for someone else, and everybody brings different things into it. So they may have gone, to a nutritionist or somebody else and said that 1,200 calorie diet, that is one I so commonly hear across the board, even myself. Like, that was just something, I'm not sure where that 1,200 number got thrown out there at one point in time, but it's something that has followed us. So depending on, what people bring in, do they have a history of trauma? Again, I'm not necessarily going to go there with you from like a psychological standpoint, because I don't have that training, but I do have enough training to know when to close my mouth and when to refer, and also how to maybe address certain things. So it will really start, most often I'll start with like a wheel of life and it's like a little pie chart, and it has all the different aspects, like spiritually, socially, financially, just all the different aspects that make up a sense of wellness, of those kind of like a hierarchy of needs, those things that make people have that overall sense of wellness. And again, it's not just nutrition and exercise that are in there, and have them grade, like, on a scale from 0 being very dissatisfied to 10 of feeling completely fulfilled, just to get that overview of like, okay, again, finding those imbalances, right? So it's like, all right, you feel like you're doing pretty well with, maybe financially, and you enjoy your job, but socially, because of 2020, we were all borderline hermits. And so now like your social aspect is really not where you'd like it to be, or maybe your nutrition isn't where you want it to be, or your romantic relationships are not where you want it to be. So that just gives me, again, a good baseline of, okay, this is what we're working with, and also just what motivates that person. Again, some people are very motivated by structure, by scheduling, other people by journaling, other people that will send them through the roof. And then also, what do they bring into it? Do they have a history of an eating disorder? I have a couple of clients that really are motivated by getting on the scale every week. I never do that unless a client absolutely asks for it. Like, no, this is an accountability tool. But even then, I'm like, are you sure? Like, I feel like I put out the scale. I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? But if I have that, again, history of an eating disorder or disordered eating, kind of to Dr. Bartlett's point, I think binge eating disorder is the one that I most commonly see. And if there's anything like that, we're just, scales are out, like, because it never needs to be focused on a number. It needs to be focused on overall health in general. So that's kind of where I get my baseline, and then we go from there.
I think that's such a fantastic point. And one of the things why I love this whole group on here is because we are all taking ownership and accountability for the individual, but in completely different ways. And that's one of the just beauties of when we have this really collaborative care. Why I love that Galia has moved into the Christ offices, and why we've done Curvy cardio with Christ and Morgan previously. And we know that we're working with Galia and Abide to bring together corporate partnerships. I mean, I think that that's the part that, like, it's not one solution. And so, Dr. Bartlett, I would love to hear just from you, where do you normally start when you might have an indication that somebody might need something a little bit further, and what how do you kind of help guide them to address some of these challenges?
So I think everybody needs something more. I mean, we're all dealing with something body-wise, weight-wise, health-wise, so we all need to be heard. A lot of the focus naturally has to do with weight loss, but it's clearly not about just weight loss. It's sometimes weight gain, and a lot of it's just body image, loving yourself. I talk to patients though all the time about how this is longitudinal, and nobody is cured. Even the women who have bariatric surgery, they're never cured. This doesn't go away. You're just managing it differently at different times of your life. And that's the same with loving your body and dealing with all of the social pressures, all of that. It all is still longitudinal and lifelong. So it doesn't go away. It's just you're using the best information to have tools to better deal with it at given stages of life. So for me, I'm seeing teenagers, I'm seeing girls who go off to college, which is obviously a very formative time for them, learning about their bodies and how their body changes, and then also pregnancy, and then after pregnancy, middle age, and why am I gaining weight, and menopause, and why do I hate this body now? I hear that all the time. And so I have the longitudinal aspect of, I see these same women over and over again at different phases of their life. And I have to use the metrics, like you mentioned. We have to use BMI and body fat and body weight and all these things as sort of surrogates of overall health, but they are just that, and they have very clear limitations. So it's just a quick, easy way for me to put benchmarks, but knowing that you can't put too much value on that at all. We all know people who are normal in BMI and weight, but are very malnourished. And frankly, that's probably a lot of Americans right now, because culturally we just have a bad relationship with food. So it's interesting because I think part of what I do is, although I'm seeing women longitudinally, I make an effort every visit to talk to patients a little bit about, how do you move? Is this formal exercise? And that movement, you talked about joyful movement. I love that, because I tried to talk to people about it not being punishment. And what do you do to keep your body moving and active and to feel good and to feel limber and all the things you should feel at different stages of your life? I mentally track what their weight's doing, because it's an accountability that they don't need to track, but I need to know so that it can trigger me to ask the questions when something else is happening, and to get ahead of it, hopefully before it gets into their head, so to speak. So I'm kind of tracking those metrics, but having a conversation, I think, that goes in parallel with it, and then talking to them about, I mean, part of it, while I'm doing breast exams and all these other routine gynecologic things, asking them, what do you do for food? How do you cook for yourself? How often do you eat out? Just casually, without any finger pointing or anything like that. It's just having the conversation and then seeing where that goes. And a lot of times women take it where they want it to be. That's also my opportunity to educate about these things, because again, just as Americans, we really screwed up relationships with food. And there's a lot to be learned about that. And like I said earlier, there's a lot of science to be learned. And the big message I have a lot after coming full circle with all of that is to talk to patients about, it ultimately has to do with mindfulness, which I know is become kind of a meaningless word because it's so overused, but I'm talking about being aware of how your body moves, that it feels good to move, and it feels good to feel energetic and capable and strong, and being aware of how food makes you feel. What foods make you tired? Why does food make you feel anxious, or why do you feel shame about food? All of that. That's all mindfulness, and recognizing what you put into your food, into your body, and then how your body uses that. And I think when people are really mindful of it, they have a better lifelong relationship with their own body and how it works.
I think that the intentionality conversation on, really looking at and addressing maybe some of the habits, I think you're absolutely right that the concept of mindfulness, of just being aware that you're even doing some of the things that you're doing. I know that, and there's some things that, again, and maybe this gets into, I'd love to hear from Sarah about, there's a guilt and shame factor to some of these pieces. And then there's just an unawareness piece too. And then the worst, and this is my opinion, this is not factual, or you don't quote me on this, but the one that I think is the worst is, I think I'm making a good choice, but it's actually not a good choice. But because of marketing and commercialization, they've made me think that I'm living a healthier lifestyle. And I think that that's the part that why it's just so overwhelming, and where we find it wise that financial literacy and nutritional health are the number one, number two biggest outages with our organization over 33 states and 6 countries. Huge outage in knowing, and it's why people don't want to address it. And so I would love to hear, Sarah, for you, this mental space of even addressing this or stepping into this, where do you see is a good place to start in a foundational knowledge of how to even move forward?
No, I've loved so much of what people are saying. I've been jotting down some notes oh, I want to add to that.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned the guilt and shame piece, because we know eating disorders are typically they're shame-based disordered. Underneath it all, it's rooted in shame. So the more we're able to kind of talk about these things and talk about food, talk about our bodies, talk about some of the things maybe we've been experiencing inside, is where we can start to tell our stories, be set free. I think Morgan mentioned the importance of telling your story, kind of owning your story, and how important that can be to kind of come out of the hiding. That can be our typical way with the feeling of shame. Another thing I wanted to respond back to, I love that the joyful movement. I do something very similar. One of my favorite questions to ask patients when they're struggling with their relationship with movement, and I like to use movement versus exercise. It just feels less, I don't know, stigmatizing in some ways. It's no, we move our bodies, and it's good to move our bodies, and we like to move our bodies, and our body wants to move. But the question I like to ask is okay, so if we take away body shape, size, calories, all of that, and we just think about what does our body actually like to do, and we take some mindfulness around that. And it's actually, they get a little giddy sometimes when you ask that question, because it's oh my gosh, I think about when I was a kid, and I love to just climb, and I love to chase my friends around, and I love to dance in my family room, and it's okay, let's start there. Those are things your body naturally just wanted to do. No one told you had to do those things. And how do we build in some natural movement that your body actually just enjoys? And that's going to be something more longstanding. And then on the food aspect of things, our culture feeds this so much, that whole good and bad foods. And from an eating disorder perspective, we definitely we want to cut that part out so much. We want food just to be food. Food nourishes our body. We want to find balance. We want to find variety. We want to make sure that we are honoring our body through food. We want to feel good after we have food, and we want to enjoy the cake at the birthday party. Like, all of those things are okay. And that's part of the shame too. We find shame around, like, oh my gosh, I did just eat that pizza. Oh my gosh, I did just have that cookie. And being able to have some self-compassion around that, and just humanness in that. Like, I mean, pizza tastes good, cookies taste good. We're allowed to enjoy that too, and be able to honor the body, the majority of the time, where we're finding balance, and not about good or bad. Because when we do good or bad, then it ends up feeding that shame that feeds an eating disorder, or just disordered eating, or just our relationship with ourselves.
I think that that's so important. And I think that as we're kind of closing out this conversation, I think it's really important to just kind of acknowledge and recognize that everything you've heard today is it's a very individualized and personalized approach. That what your story and journey with food and body image is very unique and individual to you, to the experiences that you face, to potential trauma, to potential criticism and shame and things put on you from a very early age that you might not even be aware of. And so as you approach this, these mass targeted, ads and like messages that you're receiving, I think that the best thing that you can do is just, again, be more intentional about paying attention to the way that you are, the messages that you're sharing with yourself, the messages that you are taking in from people on social media. Look at who you're following, ask yourself why you're following them, what kind of message is that really the type of life that you want to live. And then as you kind of think about, because really what we take in is what we put out. And I think that that's just so true across the board. I think that if you acknowledge and recognize that maybe you have challenges, understanding that that safe space exists for conversation across the board. We've shared today with 4 incredible women who have 4 very safe communities and individualized approaches to how to step into a conversation on how to even start the conversation about healthy nutrition. And I've not been bashful about my journey and just with body image and growing up being, the tallest person in my class the whole time. And so knowing that, I was never going to be, the last time I was a size 2, I think I was in like the 3rd grade, like it just is never fleeting, never going to be a thing. But I think that as we identify like how we're going to step in, I just would love for a quick round robin, rapid fire, for you to just share some closing thoughts on maybe, some of the key things that how people can get started. What are some of the questions that you most often hear, and how, if people are going to reach out to you to get this started, like how would they even step into that?
Mute. Basically just, I tell people you have to be ready when you're ready. There's nothing I can say. There's nothing anyone here can say. And that's okay. You have to be ready to start when you're ready. When I first started my wellness fitness journey, I was the only one in the gym. My happy hours look completely different. So I would say do it when you're ready. And I always say my body, my goals, my pace. And that's okay. And you may lose some friends. It's the wildest thing. People really don't like when you better yourself sometimes. And you have to be okay with that as well. And so do it for you, do it when you're ready, and just do it.
Sounds like you lost the right ones. You maybe gained a few of the right ones. So
yes,
that's great. Dr. Bartlett?
Yeah, so I get a lot of questions about like what diet, what's the right diet for me? And I tell patients there's not one diet that works for everybody. Obviously, it's just not that simple, and it's insulting to act like it is. And when people say it's still calories in, calories out, no, it's insulting. It's just not. So our physiology is, each of us is different. And I think there's a lot of medical science, there's a lot of information out there, but I think we have to kind of practice kindness and understanding that our own struggles physically, physiologically have a lot to do with everything else around us. You talk about sleep, you talk about movement, your hormones, your epigenetics, your cultural availability of food and portions, and all of these different things are why there's not one diet for everybody. And I think really understanding that goes a long way to understanding your journey in terms of understanding how your body works and loving the body you're in and using it the best you can for the healthiest future. So I talk to people, it's not weight loss, it's reframing that relationship with your body and with food and with movement so that it's sustainable, lifelong patterns of using food and moving.
I love that. I think that's so fantastic. And Emily, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, actually, I want to springboard right off of that because I love that idea. Same thing, like it's never about a specific number. Like Dr. Bartlett said, that's only ever one piece of it. And that's the thing too. I mean, even from my own personal experience, having gone down that very dark road of developing a full-blown eating disorder and having to go into treatment for it, there was always a number I had in mind of like, oh, when I get to this number, I'll be happy. When I get to that number, and then I'd get to that number and I wouldn't be happy. And then I'd move the bar a little more, and then I'd move the bar a little more, and then I'd move the bar a little more. And I was never happy. And so now I can tell you that, I've got, hashtag mom bod, and I'm the happiest I've probably ever been. And because again, it's not about that number, and it's about really doing those things that fill you up, that make you have that overall sense of health and wellness. And yes, movement and nutrition are a part of that, but there's so much more to the just being healthy. And I think when we start to shift our focus and our understanding that our bodies are, instruments and not ornaments, that's where a lot of that like healing and just again, different perspective comes in. And so, yeah, that's what fires me up. That's what I love to help people work with. And sometimes people, again, will come in and their first question will be, are you going to prescribe a diet? And are you going to prescribe a workout plan? Nope, I'm not going to do either. We'll talk about, honoring your hunger and fullness cues. The closest I tiptoe to any kind of like nutrition type program is just working towards more exchanges, which is more like a Weight Watchers, like everything fits in. If you want the pizza, eat the pizza. But again, honoring your hunger and fullness and intuitive eating is really the approach that I take there, and finding joyful movement, and then getting into some exercises that really get more towards the emotional and mental health aspect of it. Again, not in like a therapy kind of session way, but just those exercises around, eliminating negative self-talk, identifying limiting self-beliefs, positive affirmations, just these things that are going to help you appreciate and respect your body, because that's really where that shift comes in. And that's where that contentment and that happiness and satisfaction with just the life that you are purposely and mindfully creating for yourself, that's where that happiness comes in. Not, once I reach this number of these weight loss goals, then I'll be happy. It won't ever make me happy.
Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. And that's so true, right? Of really even outside of this is like, if we're doing it for the wrong reasons, it will never be fulfilling, right? It has to be in alignment and congruent with your values. It has to be in alignment with like really, truly like living this full life of purpose. And just to close this out, Sarah, I'd love to hear, your thoughts on like, how do we even step forward in this, and how do you get into this first dialogue with folks who might be having some challenges here?
Yeah. And it's kind of a springboard off of what Emily was saying, just that idea of, am I living a value-filled life? Am I taking the steps every day that are in tune with who I want to be? And often if we're focusing so much on body shape, size, and food, we're missing out on something that maybe we were called to do, or connections that we're missing out on. So like, what is that standing in the way of, and what's more important to me right now? How do I really step in line with my values? And then I think I know you had asked us to talk about maybe a question that we get a lot. And often I get like, how am I ever supposed to start beginning to love this body that I live in? And, I like to talk about the whole idea of mindfulness, and that idea of like, first, before we can start making life better, we have to stop making it worse. So we kind of take some time to really see, how are we making it even harder for ourselves? And then we start with baby steps. Like, again, going back to, I really think about our relationship with our body and a relationship with ourselves. And maybe we just got to start at the very basics of like function over form. Maybe I'm not really going to love the form I live in every day, but can I notice that I'm breathing? Can I notice that my heart is beating? Can I notice that my eyes are seeing? Can I notice just the function of the body that's taking place each and every day, and finding some awe in that? And then as time goes on, maybe we start to develop more and more of a relationship where at the end, maybe we can accept it. Maybe we can find respect for it, and maybe ultimately love it and want to just really enjoy it every day. But we got to start somewhere. So stop making it worse, and then start with function over form.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. It really, even a step further of getting back to the basics. You talk about with why is a lot about Maslow's and like sleep, water, shelter, getting into that side, but that's psychological safety and security. I mean, we're really like honoring the fact that we get to wake up every day and like breathe air. Like, cool, that should be enough. Like, we're worthy, like just being able to show up and have this conversation. And I'm so grateful for the time with all of you ladies here today, as experts at what you do in this space. I think it's just so crucial that we continue to have this dialogue and that we continue to share our key insights of how we're going to progress and move this forward. And so thank you so much for being here today. We will have information on the website for each one of these groups. Please make sure that you check out each one of their different groups. As I've mentioned, Curvy Cardio, we have Summertime Fun going on this month. It's super fun. If you've never done Curvy Cardio, it's an absolute blast. I recommend that you check it out. And as far as Abide with Anchor Wellness, we have an event coming up this Thursday where we'll be there for a small business event. If you're interested, check it out. And make sure that you check out Galia Collaborative in the Christ Hospital, this incredible new partnership. They've got so many amazing things happening, from what's going on with postpartum care all the way to what's happening with, as Dr. Bartlett and Sarah had mentioned, just being able to have a more honest, thorough conversation about how we as women are managing our health and wellness, our bodies, our relationship with food, and how we're going to make sure that we can put ourselves first so we can invest in others. Thank you so much for joining me here today, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Be well.